it's going to be three amazing poets from Singapore, three voices from Singapore, and it's the return of Singapore to our festival after some years since the post-pandemic. But when we began, um, Edwin Thambu was a inspiration and, in fact, a big encouragement. We looked out at rooms like this quite regularly with Thambu, and why are we doing it? What is the point of it? And Edwin Thambu always said what we're doing is very important. Um, and I do believe it. The connection is there are a lot of resonances between Singapore and Goa, believe it or not. And of course, there are many historical connections. But one of the more delightful appearances at the early Goa Arts and Literature Festival was Joshua. And he read his poems very memorably a few times. But you're coming back after 10 years, is it, Joshua? 12 years. What's your first, before your people come, what is your take on is it different? Is it a different India? It's a different Joshua?
T- t- I feel it's very familiar in some ways because what drew me to this festival when I first came was this sense of community, this sense of passion and willingness. And I've been to many festivals where the writer is very separate from the audience, where the writer is put on a pedestal and elevated above everybody else and separated in that way. But I feel this is a very warm community festival in which everyone knows everyone. There's a sense of connection with the audience. They relate to the work, and the work communicates across from the writer to the stage. So I feel that still today is still a common thing, and I enjoy that passion and that connection. And now I see two Singaporeans who are going to
Yes,
join me
two
very
other
soon.
Singaporeans have attended. Um, Welcome. You're both on time. But I want to thank Daryl particularly because I met Daryl in Dibrugarh, and the idea was to bring back this relationship. So big hand, please, for Daryl for making it happen. Um, and I'm not going to say much more, but we have three super welcome. Noor, it's your first time. And Noor has become in a short period of time. He's been having an immersion course in the Northeast. He's been spending time with the Nagas. He's been spending time with the Assamese, and he's going to go back an ambassador, which is the way this festival should be. And you're all part of the family now. I really welcome you all, and you're in for a treat. Three amazing voices from Singapore: Joshua, Daryl, Noor. Welcome.
Well, we thought we were going to start at 4 o'clock, but since we've launched into it, we're going to just keep going with poetry. So we have no real plan. We have no real moderator either. So we're just going to moderate each other and read some poems first. We'll read about maybe like 5 minutes of poems each, and we'll see where it takes us from there, and have a free-flowing conversation about whatever happens along the way. So maybe I want to invite our unofficial ambassador to the Northeast first, Nora, to start us off with some poetry. A round of applause for Nora.
Hello, hello. What? Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Nor. Very nice to meet you all. Very happy to be here in Goa. It's my first time in India, so it's just been an amazing experience thus far. You want me to read something? Uh, Yes, let me introduce myself. Yes, I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and I'm also a poet. And my introduction to poetry and I think taking poetry more seriously was through the spoken word scene in Singapore. Um, Joshua and Daryl, they've been poets far longer than I've been. And while I was working on my manuscript, I was actually looking at their works to see if I was ready to submit my manuscript myself. Both my collection, Homesick, came out last year in 2025 with Ethos Books. Unfortunately, I didn't bring any of my books here, so you can go online to get an e-copy. And then this came out in June last year, and then my chapbook, Ginsberg Sing Me a Jiwang Song, came out in December last year. So After Image Press is a non-profit branch, publication branch of Singlet Station, which Joshua runs. Do you want to share a little bit more about Singlet Station, Joshua?
Sure. Singlish Station is a small organization set up to support writing in Singapore. We've been around for about 10 years, so this is our 10th year, and we've grown over time, and we recently started publishing as well because we realized there was a bit of a gap in the scene in terms of publishing poetry. There are plenty of presses that publish novels, that publish fiction, publish like non-fiction books, but for poetry, especially new poetry from new voices like Noor, there weren't that many presses willing to devote that kind of risk, that kind of that effort. So After Image is a press designed to just focus on new voices, new poets, and to bring the best of Singapore's new voices to the world, as it were. Back to you.
Yes, so I mean, yesterday we were having dinner, and then Daryl, you were talking about um, making words that are typically not poetic to be more poetic, and I thought that would be like a good starting point, right? Talking about vocabulary, the vocabulary of the poet, and encountering the city and where we live, and then sort of translating that into poetry. Would you want to share about that?
Hello. Yeah. I think maybe just a quick show of hands. How many of you have been to Singapore? So okay, you all know Singapore super well. There's no need for any introduction whatsoever. Have you not? What? Okay, we need to get Vivek to Singapore as soon as possible. So I think Singapore is kind of an interesting place. I think even to me as a Singaporean, I even though I lived there for ages and ages, to me it's like there are a lot of contradictions in Singapore because it's very highly urbanized, it's super dense, but at the same time there's a lot of tropical rainforests, there's a lot of trees, and it's kind of super modern, it's hyper modernized, and yet it's also in some ways not the most liberal democracy, right? So it's kind of all these things are sort of in place. And so I think living in Singapore, I think, and I'll speak about this in my book later, I think I began to think a lot about these contradictions. Am I living in a utopia or a dystopia? It's kind of like, and the line between the two kind of blurs very easily as you think about these issues. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. And I think a lot of my poems kind of play with language that people may not think of as poetic. So the language of civil service documents, the language of legal documents, the language of advertising brochures, kind of very postmodern kind of thinking about language. And I think that's where I start from. And I think the other thing to say about this showcase is that I think Noor, Joshua, and I have very different approaches to poetry, and you'll see that. And I think the thing about Singapore is that for some reason we have a lot of poets. I have no real idea why. I think some people say it's because we're so time-starved that we can only write poetry. So I'm very glad that Jemima is here. She spoke in the previous panel, and she has a great novel called The Original Daughter. So we have a lot of poets, and I think over time the poetry scene has developed to such a point that it showcases many diverse styles of different. Since you'll see a bit of that. Noor actually has kind of a, can I say, music, lyrical, club scene. Do you come from the club scene? Yeah, a little bit. I think so. That's kind of what you'll see. Joshua is kind of the granddad. Not yet the granddaddy. The daddy of using more informal Singaporean vernacular in poetry. So you might hear about that. You'll see what I'm about later. Okay, that's a lot of preamble to wait for the people to come in. So let's start with Noor, reading things. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so we'll start with a poem. Because it's Valentine's Day. So we have decided that we will be reading some love-ish poems. I have a little bit more love poems than I like, but I think this one maybe can be an introduction to the city of Singapore in a more indie film cinematic type of way. Give me a moment. Okay. This This poem is called Coming of Age. It's from my chapbook with Afterimage Press, Ginsberg Sing Me a Jiwang Song. This is indie film cinematic, creative nonfiction turned cult classic. This is coming of age, young adult, underdeveloped. No need to speak of the prefrontal. You'll want to see me from the back instead. You hate to see me go, but you like to watch me leave. This is crush, crush, crush. This is infatuation. This is maybe queer representation. This is you asking me out first. This film takes place in an exhibition. This exhibition is lands-based and feminist in its approaches. You grew up in a private estate. I work 3 jobs and I'm a Marxist. It's never gonna happen. It's fuck it, I'll give it a go. This is between Queen Street, churches and public housing. This, that not so sweet kopi O. Not much of a coffee drinker, but I'll have what you're having, kind of having. This is low self-esteem and no real sense of self. So I mirror the people I love, or at least the people I like. When I am more like you, I'll hate myself less. This film is low budget with big ambitions. This film is asked to show more and tell less, so we have very little dialogue, plenty of silence and golden hour. This is mono no aware. You sip your coffee, I sip my coffee. We order the same exact thing, but I'll ask, how does yours taste? There's no time for dialogue. Some things are better left unspoken. The audience will know I will only push you away. This film ends with me revisiting the same block of flats one day. This is yearning. This is fully realized now. This is grief. And this is the closest I'll come to closure.
Sorry, I was going to ask you just before I read my own poem. Could you explain the title of the book?
Okay. So
It's called, yeah.
yes. Ginsberg Sing Me a Jiwang Song. So there is a genre of music in Malaysia, 80s Malay rock. It's called Jiwang. So Jiwang comes from the word Jiwa. I think some of us would know the word Jiwa. I think we have common roots in that. So Jiwang songs are songs that are like overly sentimental. It's almost like embarrassing how emotional. And usually these are songs done by men who are on the onset of like adolescence, but also like grown men, just pouring their heart out over like rock music. And I was inspired to sort of marry the spirit of the beat poetry of Ginsberg, along with like Malay lyricism and I think motive of nature, emotional nature. Yeah.
No, that's great. Okay, I will read from my book. This book is called Anything But Human. And in some ways, I think I was talking to someone just now. This book conceives of the world as like a trash heap. And in a way, the world that we're living now is increasingly a trash heap, right? Environmentally, on social media, there's more and more slop. And so this book was really conceived from that place. How do you write poetry in a trash heap? How do you write yourself out of that trash heap? And in some ways, it uses language you don't expect to be poetic in a poetic way, hopefully. So I think I won't say more. I'll just read the first poem of the book. It's called Expression of Contentment. I am extraordinarily, really, very comfortable. Even my toes have gone for psychoanalysis. And my nose hairs have their favorite brand of chips. Sour cream, never barbecue. The tree outside my flat turned blue, and I said nothing. And all morning the clouds grew pregnant with knives, and I said nothing. And the table is cleaner than ever. There has been an utter genocide of dust. It's crazy. I'm so comfortable. My thighs have turned to organic jam, and my tongue is purple. Although, outside of a sundae, do you know what a strawberry tastes like? Okay, thank you. Over to you, Josh.
All right. Thank you, Daryl. I'm going to read this collection called Own Self, Say Own Self, and I'm going to find a love poem to read since that was up. This is a bit of an old collection in that it collects up my last six books and the best of the last six books into this bit of book. And also, there's new stuff in here as well. So, 44 old poems from my last six collections and 44 new poems. So, I'm going to read something that's actually a good, like, 15 years old. And I now find that it's a bit dated, so I need to explain a little bit some of the cultural context. So there are three things you need to know when I read this poem. The first is that in Singapore we have these chains of mini marts. One is called NTUC and one is called Cold Storage. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I refer to this ancient Chinese legend of the weaver girl in the cowherd. So they are separated in the stars because the gods were angry with them, and then they were separated as different constellations. But they only meet once a year at the spring equinox, and then like these birds form this bridge between them. That's the Milky Way, and they can finally see each other again in the stars. So very romantic legend. And the third thing is this poem is called Plastic Bags. So for those of you like who are a bit younger, plastic bags are these things used in the late 20th century to pack things up, and then in Singapore like we like fold them up into like nice triangles and then to recycle them because they're not biodegradable. All right, plastic bags. This I learned from you, and not my mom. To take the plastic bags from groceries and fold them into housewife triangles, then leave them in a drawer and forget them. Where in a post-apocalyptic future, alien archaeologists will unearth them, wondering at these dainty, elegant, and non-biodegradable artifacts. They will empty all the neatly tucked-in bits onto the still glowing surface of the earth and reconstruct the history of mankind, amazed at what wise culture could conceive of such faithfully replicated folds. Academics go wild with far-fetched theories, while a veritable industry springs up, shuttling tourists from the furthest planets to marvel at the Terran triangles. Religions rise around their geometry. Poets and prophets worship at their creases. The galactic government is prevailed upon to declare a festival to commemorate Earth's near-forgotten summer solstice, where ancient humankind's long-extinct lovers, Cold Storage Girl and NTUC Boy, unite at last across the Milky Way on a bridge of floating plastic triangles. Thank you. All right, let's talk a bit about Singapore. Yeah, I'm just gonna ask you those kind of generic questions, like why did you become a poet? Why on earth did you choose this very non-lucrative profession in this country that's so expensive and so anti-poetry in some ways? I mean, Singapore is very known for this moment where our founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, he was asked in a university by a whole bunch of art students because he was talking a lot about science and technology and engineering. And it's all very important, very important. And a brave young student said, "Sir, but what about poetry?" And in 1978, he said, "Poetry is a luxury we cannot afford." And that has defined our national identity in many ways. So with that in mind, why? Why do you write poetry? Maybe Nor first.
You know, Josh, when you were reading plastic bags, right? It's called plastic bags. When I was very young, when I was serving the nation, so in Singapore, people who are born male, they have to serve the nation for 2 years. When I was serving my national service, my mother used to live in this area called Spooner Road, which was a few streets down from this bookstore called Math Paper Press. So I had a huge crush on this person, right? And I don't know why, but I was reading a lot of authors like Alfian Sa'ad, Cyril Wong, Pooja Nancy. But when I picked up Joshua Ipps Making Love with Scrabble Tiles, I thought to pass him a copy of it and ask him to read the poem Plastic Bag specifically. Um, I I think growing up, I've always had an inclination towards poetry. I read Sylvia Plath, and a lot of and even Edgar Allan Poe. I think there was this very like gothic self upbringing. But when I started to read poems by Singaporean poets, I felt an urgency to tell my own stories, and I felt that because I was introduced to the poem as this possible way of telling my stories. I think that was the mode that I became most familiar with before I got introduced to plays and then other novels by Singaporeans. Yeah. What about you, Daryl?
I mean, yeah, we're obviously not in it for the money or the huge paychecks. Should have become a novelist. Well done, Jemima. Uh, I think I think my story is quite similar in a way. The Singapore that I grew up in the 1990s was kind of a very regimented, cookie cutter Singapore. So it was kind of, uh, man, woman, 2.14 kids, living in all these quite sterile, quite functional housing blocks. And in a way, although my parents were never very pressurizing on me, there was quite a quite a stressful educational system was pumping us out in kind of a very well educated, very well skilled, very well trained, very well disciplined Singaporeans. And I felt like the best way out of that was to go to the library. And my mother always brought me to the library every weekend. And that's why I started to read. That's why I started to read poetry. And that was, I think, a way out of, or trying to imagine myself outside of Singapore and trying to imagine a world and commune with other poets and readers across the world. So I think that's my kind of origin story, either as a superhero or like a villain. You both. So I think that's why I started to write poetry.
Very noble reasons. I would say that mine is a bit closer to Noor, in that I started writing poetry when I was 14 for the sole purpose of impressing girls. There was this girl I liked that just wrote her poems. And I tried this a few times and it never worked. Every single time I tried to write a poem to impress a girl, they were not impressed. But I realized that after I had tried and failed multiple times and kept trying, I realized I was not so much into the impressing of girls, but I was still into the poetry. And even after I realized that I had failed to impress girls consistently with this stuff, I still wanted to write. And I think that was at the point where I realized that actually there's something intrinsic here that speaks to me. This absurd way of conveying myself in a way that's not very clear and not very normal, that I just enjoy for the sake of it. And there's this quote by Zaborska that speaks to me a lot. It's, I prefer the absurdity of writing poems to the absurdity of not writing poems. Yeah, and that's more or less why I write. I do want to introduce a different part of Singapore that we've not touched on so far, which is that we are quite a multilingual or bilingual or sesquilingual country in some ways. How many people in the room can speak more than one language?
I think that's most of India.
It's most of India. That's good. That's good. Real. In Singapore, we are forced to do so because we are forced to speak two languages in school. The first is English. It's defined as the first language. It's imposed upon us as the first language of commerce, of the state, of officiality. And we all have we get imposed upon us a mother tongue, which is either Mandarin, Malay, or Tamil. And in recent years, we've added Hindi, Urdu, Gujarati, so on and so forth. But in the 90s, actually, there was only Tamil, which is very difficult for some Indians who go over there who don't speak any Tamil, and they must choose a mother tongue. And that often becomes Malay. Yeah. So all of us have a mother tongue and a first language, and all of us have a bit of a mixed relationship with the mother tongue. Because your parents, you speak your mother tongue, usually, if you're lucky. But not always, because in Singapore, we're majority Chinese. And in Chinese, we were forced to learn Mandarin by the state. But many of our parents actually spoke different dialects of China, whether it's Hokkien, Cantonese, Shanghainese, various other variants. And in fact, some of them couldn't even speak Mandarin to begin with, especially our grandparents. So we all grew up with this strange relationship with Chinese, the written script, and Mandarin, the spoken language. And we're all forced to learn all these ancient Chinese poems by like Tang Dynasty poets that are all very short and only have like 20 words, like 4 lines of 5 words each. And we're forced to memorize them in this language that's supposedly our mother tongue, but we don't really know. So I have this mixed relationship through the years with Chinese, in that I think in English, I dream in English, and I communicate in English much better. But I do have this strange sense of Chinese somewhere in the back that it belongs to me, but not really, but kind of, but not really. And so I wrote this book called Translations to the Tanglish. These are the translations of like the best Tang Dynasty poems ever, because I googled best Tang Dynasty poems and I chose those. And I translated them into my through my broken Chinese into my less broken English. And what I did was kind of abandon the assumption in translation that you must be faithful to the original translator. I'm like, no, fuck that. I wanted to bring these dead Chinese poets who've been dead for like hundreds of years into 2025, into Singapore, into the context of what I was living and living and learning, into technology and into COVID and all of these strange and terrible things. So I'm going to read one of these ancient Chinese poems that is probably the most famous Chinese poem of all time. And it's actually by this guy called Li Bai, probably the most famous Chinese poet of all time. And it's the most cliched Chinese poem ever. It's about like in front of your bed, there's like the moonlight is shining, and then you think that it's frost, and then you raise your head and you stare at the moon, and you lower your head and you think of your hometown. That's every Chinese poem ever. Some natural phenomenon, then some feeling. So I'm going to read the Chinese and the English, my translation, back to back. 静夜思 thoughts, silent night. 床前明月光 the upstairs window glows. 疑是地上霜 with aircon condensation. 举头望明月 craning my neck, I watch the flickering shades. 低头思故乡 taking out my phone, I check my family group chat. I'm going to read two more of these short poems, also about technology and also about ancient history. The next one's another famous Chinese poem about the sun is setting below the mountains and the river is flowing to the ocean, and I want to look 1,000 miles, so I will climb up one level to the next story. 灯冠阙楼 uprising. 白日依山尽 the loading page cuts off like a horizon. 黄河入海流 as news flows bit by bit into the ocean. 欲穷千里目 intend to drain each kilobyte of my quota. 更上一层楼 I climb the stairs to get better reception. And one last one for all those for the hand foam generation. This poem's actually a love poem by Wang Wei. It's about this like red saga seed that represents love in East Asia, and so this red saga seed is like it grows in the southern countries and it blooms in spring. So I wish that you would pick a few more for me because this thing represents love. So it's a bit of a subtle like, hey, love me poem. 相思 red beans. 红豆生南国 saga seeds bloom at the bottom of my screen. 春来发几枝 spring forth at every tag, reply or mention. 愿君多采撷 and how I wish you'd pick a few for me. 此物最相思 these things demand the most attention. Thank you. All right, over to Daryl, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we hadn't quite planned what to read in what sequence, so I'm just riffing off Josh now. I was going to read another poem, but I think I'll read this one, which I read at another festival in India, and it's basically about Chinese New Year. Since Josh read a Chinese poem, and it's about how my family celebrates Chinese New Year and a particular custom that we have, which you might not quite expect. Okay, let's go. Dosei is the taste of Chinese New Year. Most of the stalls in the market are shut, so my dad buys it back in brown wrapping paper, the smell of spices suffusing the home. Groggy from last night's New Year's vigil, the longer you stay awake, the longer your parents live. I'm woken up by the heat of the sambar. The starchy masala middle is a warm, gooey hug, and somehow the dough is still crisp. And when the sambar gets too hot, the coconut chutney cools. My father, my brother, and I are wordless. The especial quiet of the first day as the city pauses and allows itself to breathe just for a moment. These days, more and more shops stay open, always open. Ma finally wakes up, tucks in with us, also wordless. And after we are done, she says, "It's the new year, and you haven't greeted me yet." And so we do, of course we do. Gong hei fat hoi for Ma, who's Cantonese, and Gyong yi huat zai for Pa, who's Hokkien. Our hands clasped together. The rest of the day is more feasting and gluttony and New Year treats. Yet nothing's quite as satisfying as that first bite of masala thosai and that wordlessness. Thank you. Yeah, so it used to be the case that all the Chinese stalls would close on the first day of Chinese New Year, which is in 2 days' time. No, 3 days' time. Yeah, and so we would only eat Indian food for breakfast every Chinese New Year.
It's actually all the Chinese stalls and also the Malay stalls because it's Lunar New Year as well. So you only have Indian food left. But for me, my choice is KFC, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the idea of food, especially in Singapore poetry, it creeps up quite a bit. Actually, so thank you for reading your poem because I wanted to read this next poem anyway, but because Daryl's poem mentioned the tose, so I also have a poem that mentions the tose, but it's about my dead grandfather. Um, yes. So this is a bit long, so. Yeah, if you need to grab some tissues, just feel free to do so. Another grandpa poem uh, from my debut collection, Homesick. Another dead grandpa poem. Another poem for my dead grandpa. Man, you loved me, but all my life I've only ever loved boys who like me, but don't know if they like me more as girl or boy, who like my attention, but never brave enough to share that they're unsure of themselves, so they're unsure of me. They waste my time, and I allow them to. Am I just drawn to sons, absent, like father? While you, my grandfather, crossed waters to take me to a better home, ran to the hospital with me in your arms when there was no public transport and you couldn't get a taxi, lathered my infant skin with generous amounts of soap, eager to keep me milk tea brown, fed me with sao matang hands, banana leaf pack nasi lemak until I threw up sick over prayer carpets in school. My favorite mornings, days when we shared plain toast, fussy child with sensorial food issues, and to this day I still do. The day I could start remembering, I recall you pawned grandma's gold to keep us afloat. I drowned. You left me to wander into the fluid blue of the Clementi fountain in its earlier days. I woke up later, soaked. How did I get home? You carried me, of course, the way you always did. Karaoke Sundays, you passed me the mic, tell me my voice was good enough to sing. You didn't like it if I was too still, made sure I knew how to move, clapped your hands, kept me dancing to different rhythms. Eventually, I got into trouble, dancing all the time. You got called to school because in the mosque, one can only worship God through stillness. You made sure I was full of life. And the one we were living, you wanted to document all the time, taught me how to use your video camera to see your world and tell a story through the footage you gathered. Never a big fan of the way you edited things. You were ahead of your time, non linear. So you molded me. Spliced footage of me singing and dancing right after somebody's funeral. You loved me dearly, and I really want to love me the same. I see quiet demeanor, because you were mostly silent in all your fights with grandmother. You stood still and witnessed the storms until they passed. I think it was voiceless rage. You were man, dispossessed, grew up too quickly, worked when you could have been dancing, labored in all other ways when you could have been storytelling. I thought I was Storm as well. Dreamt of a man standing still in my hurricane until I decided I could be healer. If I held the hands of the man I love, they wouldn't bring their feelings to the grave. Hours before your final breath, you came to my room and asked questions that irked me. Asked me what I wanted to do next. How was I supposed to know? I told you I just wanted to be posted out to sea. Thought I could be sailor. Thought I could love the furious water. Thought I could live on an island the way you grew and came to be. Waters in the dark would only engulf me. 7 years after your death, we invoked you at therapy. God would only let you talk to me so frequently. Imagine you beside me on the couch. I paid $150 an hour for. What would you say? That it's okay? That I'm doing my best or that I've erred in my ways, but must I remain strong? Or should I be softer? That while you've left this plane, you still live on through me. That there's still the world for me to see, to take better photographs and videos that you did. To keep on moving, dancing, singing in loving my memory. You might have been ahead of your time, but who says I can't just love the present? I seek you in all my lovers. Love friend till he becomes brother. Love brother till he becomes lover. I wish lover can become father to my children to be carried home again someday.
All right. I'm gonna ambush the two of you with a question. Since you're talking so much about food, and this just came to mind, and I realized you both have two books each. So can you like name two dishes that represent your two books and explain why? It's a bit of an ambush, so I'll go first because I had time to think. So I brought two books here. I have more than two books. And so this is the Chinese book that I mentioned that translations into English. And to me, this represents a dish called ayam buah keluak, which is a Peranakan dish. Peranakan cuisine is a mix of Chinese and Malay cuisine. And it's kind of an invented culture in some ways that's a bit disrespectful to one of the original cultures. So I find this book a bit like that. It's an invention. It's a bit disrespectful, but I hope that it's delicious anyway. This book is again my new and selected. It's a bit of best of. So the dish I think of is nasi ambeng. It's this platter of like delicious things, a bit like fish thali in some ways. It's a big platter of just delicious food with rice at the heart of it. Because nasi is rice, and yeah, this book is that to me. It's just this collection of the best of stuff that I've done. And now that I've given you about 30 seconds, go for it.
I think Ginsberg Sing Me a Jiwang song is it's laksa. So laksa is this noodle in like coconut curry, but if you add lime, then it has this sour. There is a variant of laksa called asam laksa. Yeah, we're not sure if it just carries the namesake, but it's a little bit different. Why I say that is because it's very creamy. This this collection is very creamy.
Can you elaborate?
You'll just when you read it, you will understand why it's very creamy. Uh, with homesick, I think it is not a food, but it's probably gin and tonic. Yeah, it's gin and tonic. Homesick. Yeah. Yes.
You gotta explain that one. You gotta explain it.
Gin and tonic because I think life is tough, and sometimes you just gotta go to a club and drink a gin and tonic and find small joys. Yeah, yeah. Gin and tonic is small-ish. Yeah.
I think mine. So this book, I think I'm going to actually use Joshua's answer in a way, because he talked about the first dish, which was ayam buah keluak, and the thing about the buah keluak fruit is that if you eat it as is, it's actually poisonous. It's cyanide. You will actually die. And somehow the Peranakans and the Malays thought to eat this thing, and before you do that, you have to treat it in a certain way, and you have to cure it, and then it becomes slowly something that you can eat. And the taste is very complex. It's kind of a cross between olives and I think chocolate, and kind of it's very unusual. And I think this is kind of this book. There's parts of it which are toxic, and then I slowly make it palatable for consumption, and then at the end of it, you are craving more. Hopefully,
Your first book. Your first book.
it's
Or
not
did
here.
you
It's fine.
erase
It's
your first
okay.
book?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. I think we can open the floor for a few questions before we read some more poetry.
So for mine, I have a few copies just with me. So if you want to get the copies, approach me. We can haggle and find a suitable price.
Mine are available at the bookstore.
Yeah, so mine are just with me because I just have four or five copies, and Nor will bring some next time. Nor is here in at Goa.
More questions? Questions?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Any questions? If not, we can just read. Oh, sorry, at the back. Shout, shout. For me, the poetic process is actually not a single thing. It's separated into many different bits. So the first part of what you're kind of describing is the collection of information. So I'm assaulted by random words all the time, whether it's my own words or other people's, and I just find a good way to actually collect all of those things in a document folder of some form. And that actually is very separate from the actual writing process. When I write, I actually take out that document folder and I look at all these scraps and I try and discard and see which ones are actually relevant at each point of time. And I do a bit of assembly actually. So it's a bit like a factory line in some ways that I assemble the pieces and then I write that. And then I leave it aside. And the last part of it is actually the editing process. So when I come back to this first draft that I made in the heat of it, and I edit it in maybe less heat, in a more cool mind. And these three processes happen in very different states of minds. One in a very receptive, open, listening mentality. One in a very focused, I must make a thing now mentality. And one in the more like cold and clinical, like I need to like cut my baby off bit by bit mentality. And so those three bits are separate for me. Any more questions? Oh. Oh, do we have nationalist poets in Singapore?
So you know the guy that that Vivek always talks about, Edwin Thumbu. He's kind of our proto-nationalist poet, and he wrote this very famous poem called Ulysses by the Merlion, which is kind of like a foundational Singapore poem, which extols like Singapore as this kind of melting pot of cultures. So that's him.
I think Singapore is about 3 generations of poetry. The first generation was led by Edwin Thumbu in the 1960s and 70s. Singapore gained independence in 65. So a lot of the poetry then was trying to forge an identity of this new country that was kind of pulled together from different races and cultures and just blah and abandoned by the British. And so a lot of that poetry really of the time was really just, this is Singapore. This is what I believe Singapore is and what it should be. So very emotive, very nationalist in some ways, very aspirational. Then in the 80s, 90s, there was a bit of this middle class generation of poetry, where you have a new generation of poets born in Singapore, born under this new country identity, and trying to reinterpret it for themselves. A more affluent Singapore, a more upwardly mobile Singapore, a more well-traveled Singapore. So a lot of references to actually international things, to travel, to the middle class life, to affluence, and to dealing with like money, and that influence into like the poetry. And the third generation, I think it was heavily influenced by the internet and spoken word. This desire to confess, to tell your own story, to be honest and real in a very modern, like hyper real space. So that's kind of the generations of poetry. And the first generation is not read that well these days because nationalism doesn't sell that well in 2025 in Singapore. But I think it had value for its time. It was of a time. So Thumbu is greatly respected, but we don't read him that much anymore, unfortunately. Is Singapore today more Chinese, more Malay, or more Indian? Okay, she said it broke away on the premise of Chinese patriotism. I would dispute that a little bit. There is a large Chinese majority in Singapore. So about 2/3 of Singapore is ethnically Chinese, about a quarter is ethnically Malay, and about 10% is Indian, then about maybe like 5% of everybody else. We left Malaysia by choice, as has been recently visited, because both countries had different political identities and beliefs. Singapore believed in a bit of multiracial Malaysia. Every race should have a say, where Malaysia believed that the Malay race should be more prominent and held up and receive special privileges. And of course, being a Chinese majority, we wouldn't accept that. That would not be our belief in a very selfish manner, of course. But these two different political identities were not palatable to each other, and we were causing problems for them. They were causing problems for us. So there was a mutual agreement that we're actually better separate. Because if this goes on, there'll be riots, there'll be race riots, there'll be conflict, and there'll be this war within Malaysia itself. It's better to have two countries with different political visions. As to the original question of is Singapore more Chinese, Malay, Tamil today, I hope that Singapore is multiracial, multicultural, multilingual, and the unfortunate truth is that English is a large part of that. Having to be forced to learn English as a first language has flattened out the cultures a little bit, in that we've lost a lot of that Chineseness, that Malayness and Indianness that defined us previously, and have had that replaced with this generic Western English and like fast food and capitalism and consumerism that's just everywhere. And so there's a bit of a gain and a bit of loss. The gain, of course, is that we are multicultural. There's this acceptance that we can all be anything, but you also lose that deep connection to the ancient cultures of China, of India, of Malaysia as well. And it's a bit sad in some ways. But with gain, there's also loss. But I think I should allow other people to speak as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true ethnically speaking. If you look at it in terms of what people look like, the majority of them look Chinese. But actually, I think the way we are Chinese in Singapore is very different from the way the Chinese are Chinese in China or in Taiwan. And I think what has happened in East Asia and Southeast Asia is that there are many ways of being Chinese. So of course, I'm a Chinese who eats Indian food on the first day of the Chinese New Year, and that's uniquely Singaporean. So I think that's become a way in which even the way you are Singaporean Chinese, your Singaporean Malay or Singaporean Indian has adapted to a new context. And I hope that keeps going on, because I think you don't want to just to practice or be a Chinese that keeps taking reference from some sort of imagined center. To go back to that talk we had by Easterine, you don't want to just have a center that dictates how the rest of the race, so-called, behaves. And I think we should resist that, because I think China has its kind of own, perhaps more monolithic interpretation of what being Chinese is. And actually places like Singapore, places like Taiwan, even places like Indonesia and Malaysia, there are Chinese populations which who are Chinese, but behave or practice their Chineseness in different ways. And I think that's super important, actually.
There was an incident about 10 years ago where there was this new migrant from China, so what we call China Chinese in Singapore, and they moved into a public flat, a HDB flat, where basically all the races live in a bit of a unified manner. And that China Chinese new immigrant made a comment on Facebook saying that my neighbor is Indian and they keep cooking curry and it's very smelly and I hate it and then I cannot tolerate it and I want to complain because the curry is always in my clothes, the smell is everywhere, it's polluting my flat. And there was a very virulent response from the rest of the internet against the China Chinese person saying that curry is part of our culture, you shut up, you Chinese person. And so the whole community came together to organize a cook a pot of curry day. So the whole neighborhood was just cooking curry for the whole day. All kinds of curry, whether it was like Thai green curry or Chinese, a bit more coconut milk heavy, or of course Indian curry as well. I think that's quite a Singaporean response in some ways, that we have had this social contract of multilingualism, multiracialism, and we don't tolerate it being laughed at. Maybe one last hand over there. Oh, sorry, two questions and then we'll read poetry.
Okay. It was a really lovely session. I really enjoyed it. What I wanted to ask was a build up on her question regarding like the political system, because when I had gone for a research conference at NTU, there was and I lived in an area called Little India, and I feel like Singapore does it the best, like multilingualism, multiple cultures existing in unity. Singapore really does it very well. And I was trying to know more about the political scene, the meritocracy, the whole notion, and I was trying to find out more, because here in India we have a politician who's a very nice poet called Shashi Tharoor, and I really wanted to know like whether there was in this modern area, because when I had gone there and I was traveling on the MRT, I was traveling on the public transport, I could not see like banners or anything like that which was like promoting a party or anything like that. So I really wanted to know about this.
Singapore has, as Daryl mentioned, we're not a very liberal democracy in many ways. We do have free elections. We do have everyone votes. Our voting rate's about 97, 98%, very high. But at the same time, one party controls 92% of the seats in parliament. And there's only one other party with like 7 or 8 seats. So it's nearly a one-party state. And that one party has been in power since founding. And there are a lot of quiet constructs that prevent it from ever changing, like the media is state-owned and state-controlled. And there's a lot of use of lawsuits to actually sue opposition politicians into bankruptcy and so on and so forth. Subtle ways rather than outright jailing of your opponents. So there's that. And I think that provides stability to Singapore, but it comes at a big cost in terms of human rights. That's why Singapore usually ranks pretty low on many lists of like human rights in the world. And we've always said, or it's been said of us, that it's a social contract, that you surrender some freedoms for this like economic prosperity, this economic miracle. And as a Singaporean who's lived through this, I have, of course, have mixed views about it. I know that I'm immensely privileged, very affluent. The Singapore passport is powerful, lets me travel many places. But at the same time, I know there are political prisoners in my country that have been unfairly imprisoned for years as a result of that. And the cost of my prosperity is that kind of subtle oppression and state control. So it's not something I like to trumpet in other countries. I think it's important to see the balance of that as well. Last question over there.
I know Singapore is really expensive. So how do you guys pay bills, writing poetry full time? And do you have boring regular jobs? And if you do, does that feed into your poetry?
There are no full-time poets in Singapore. Unfortunately, we all have boring regular jobs to various degrees.
What are they?
So I just quit my boring public servant job to become an arts manager to run Singlet Station that I just mentioned. So less paying, less well-paying.
I work for a non-profit organization called Project X. We reach out to women in the red light district and ensure we teach them sexual health education. We know that there are a lot of people who are in the unregulated industry and that they may face danger while working. So what we do is we provide free condoms, free HIV and STI testing, but we also provide law aid, legal aid in the event they run into trouble. Yes, that's my day job. We have a book called The Missing Anthology, which is available online, and it actually chronicles voices of sex workers in Singapore, artworks, poetry, essays as well. I was the editor, co-editor for that, but that's a bit separate from, I guess, my poetic identity. Yeah.
I mean, I've been in the Singapore civil service for about 10 years, but my current post is in the Ministry of Culture, promoting Singapore's arts and heritage. So I'm actually very happy to be doing that because it really aligns with my own interest for once.
All right. I think we should just take one poem each quickly, and then we can take questions later, individually.
We have until 55, right? 55, right? Oh. We had 10 minutes. Okay. You want to read first? You go first. I can go. I think we're supposed to read a love poem. So this is sort of an anti-love poem. It's a longish one. The poem is called Credo, which means I believe, of course, in Latin. And I think this friend of mine challenged me to write a long poem because I don't tend to write long poems. So this is a long poem. I won't say more. Credo. I believe in the slipperiness of mornings and the scent of freshly mown man. I believe in the freezer section, that bulwark, value pack upon value pack of Japanese crispy chicken with seaweed. I believe in the glorious, heaving, finely muscled state who sets aside designated ash scattering lanes lined with a bed of pebbles which allow the ashes to percolate into the soil beneath. I believe in the air fryer. I believe in a God who doesn't know what he is doing. I believe in not masturbating 7 times a day. I believe in the Epipremnium aureum, the ubiquitous money plant, the devil's ivy, which refuses to flower, but grows recklessly, relentlessly, a strangling creeper, which will one day inherit our sodden, vacant world. I believe in the dead and their silences. I believe in the purity of hate. I believe in plastic, the sort that encases your heart and protects it from living. I believe when at last we are in paradise, it will still be possible to feel ennui. I believe in lust that keeps you awake, looking for new styles of rattan furniture. I believe in air conditioning. I believe in shopping centers where you may glimpse a far-off version of yourself in a mirror, wearing Polo Ralph Lauren, 3 kids in tow. I believe in pork, the forbidden flesh, the greasy, crispy crackling, perhaps so forbidden because so akin to man. I believe in not brushing my teeth to let the wretchedness really sink in. I believe beauty is a searing knife. I believe in globalization that washes up 28 brands of lingerie. I believe in clavicles and cheekbones. I believe in fakes. I believe in the fakeness that burrows in your brain spawning maggots of fake, which eat your body and metamorphose you into a factory of fake, shitting out fake, high-grade radioactive fake, a pus-filled lake of fake. I believe in monosodium glutamate. I believe that death is the body's reversion to normal. I believe in silencing myself before they silence me. I believe in this land of perpetual discounts. I believe the old live on to tell us lies. I believe in the blank terror that leaves me gasping for air. I believe in the sun that will evermore envelop us until it finally hatches itself. I believe in the word that chews me and glues me back. I believe in the mute certainty of obliteration. I believe in the body's slow consumption of itself. I believe we may be the dream of an alien janitor. I believe in love. I believe in the program that will resurrect us almost perfectly. I believe that time may be a collective delusion. I believe that time might be intergalactic currency. I believe that time is running out. There was too much of it anyway. And as the handsome bot on my Facebook feed tells me, time is like a pig knife. Good night. Thank you.
I'm going to read another translation of a longer Chinese poem. So this one's one of those where like someone misses this person that they love and they are 1,000 miles away, but they stare at the same moon, so it's okay. It's so famous that it was made into a pop song by Teresa Ting, and I'm going to do bits of both. 明月几时有 a bandwidth song by Su Dongpo. 明月几时有 when will you open the Zoom room? 把酒问青天 glass in hand, I asked the internet. 不知天上宫阙 and in that palatial server farm, 今夕是何年 who knows what year it is today? 我欲乘风归去 perhaps I'd ride the fibers to their source. 唯恐琼楼玉宇 but I fear those whirring racks and routers. 高处不胜寒 high end and water cooled. 起舞弄清影 with the dancing mirages of data. 何时在人间 how far from IRL? 转逐个 swiping through 第七户 scrolling past 早无眠 screen lit sleepless 不应有恨何时长相别时圆 For all of net neutrality's promises, why does my connection only clear when I close the window? 人有悲欢离合 Men will mourn and revel, part and meet. 月有阴晴圆缺 A video blurs and clears and blips. 此事古难全 And always falters when we need it most. 但愿人长久 Yet I wish we could stay like this 1,000 miles apart 千里 staring at the same screen 共婵娟 Thank you.
Okay. This poem is called Bingo. It's my friends and we played bingo on my birthday, and it's just a love letter to, I guess, the diversity of all the people in Singapore. Bingo. I call upon kindred spirits of the four corners of my beloved Lion City state, where my naughty softies, east side, dead the discourse, west side is best side, I don't make the rules. Where my young parents with the babies, we are always on the side of the woman and what they choose to do with their bodies. Where my brown buddies with the mixed heritage, with our ethnic noses and long eyelashes, with our coconut milk thick accented thighs, we can speak more languages than you ever will. Our tongues are sweet to those who would hear. We'll thrive even if you don't want us here, we don't care. We'll move to Europe or Australia, we will make life. Where are my believers in God and where are my queers? Can you believe they only want us to tick one box at a time? Where are my allies to dispel the fears? We are writers and artists and skaters, who went through an emo phase and faces and different names, no conspiracies, but we shapeshifters. Bingo.
Amazing. Big hand for Joshua, Daryl, and Noor. I think that's an amazing way to get to know Singapore. Cannot think of a better way, really. Thank you so much for that. I hope you've had a good time at the Goa Arts and Literature Festival. Let's keep this going. Once again, thank you all for being here. Big hand for Joshua, Daryl, and Noor. Thank you, guys. Please keep your seats for the next and last session. Thank you so much.